we're leaving on a tense note of the continuing hostility in Europe, the war that Russia has initiated against Ukraine, and how it's polarizing the world. What do you expect will be the outcome of this?
Well, for North Americans and Europeans, the classic West, as it were, the European security order is a core interest, to use a Chinese phrase. And so it was inevitable that we would look at a Russian invasion of Ukraine as upsetting the security architecture that had done so much for Europe and North America the last 70 years. And this wasn't a Russian invasion just to occupy parts of the territory. It was a Russian invasion to take over all of Ukraine. It was an imperialist project. So Europeans and North Americans remain very committed to ensuring that Russia is expelled from Ukraine. The analogy is what happened in 1990 in the Middle East when Iraq invaded Kuwait, and the determination then was to expel Saddam Hussein from Kuwait. Otherwise, he might go further, even into Saudi Arabia. Then the Middle East security order was at stake. Now it's the European security order.
And how do you expect this to end? Because it's not clear which way this war is going. Ukrainians have put up a brave defense, of course, with large amounts of assistance financially as well as from a military point of view from powers across the West. But it doesn't seem like it's at a decisive point right now at all.
The short answer is the war will end as Ukraine's choice. Ukraine has agency here. Putin expected that he would be in Kyiv in 3 days, a puppet government installed, and he would have de facto sovereignty all of Ukraine. That didn't happen. 80 days have passed. Ukrainians have resisted well, taken huge losses. Many Russian war crimes evidently committed, but it's Ukraine's choice. So long as Ukraine is determined to continue fighting, European and North American friends and partners of Ukraine will continue to deliver equipment, training, intelligence, and assistance of all kinds until Ukraine feels that it can dictate the terms of a peace settlement.
In your assessment, how long can Ukraine continue to put up this front?
I think it's very important to look at the next 7 or 8 weeks. For a moment, there's an arms race gap. The kind of equipment that is now being delivered to Ukraine is NATO standard equipment. That means Ukrainians need to be trained on it. They don't yet know how to operate it, cannot yet absorb it. So they have to continue to survive the next 3 or 4 weeks in eastern Ukraine. If they survive that period and are still being able to fight, they could start turning things in another direction. But it's a war that could still last many, many months.
If it doesn't go that way, and if Russia does prevail, what do you expect will be then the balance of power in at least this part of the world?
The determination on the part of the United States and on the principal European allies that Russia just can't prevail, and Russia won't be able to prevail on its terms. The risk is that at a certain point, they declare their desire for a ceasefire when they realize that they can't gain more territory, and President Zelensky will be put under great pressure then, because he won't want to agree to a ceasefire that only provides a rest for the Russians, an ability for them to recoup themselves, organize themselves, and then try again. Even the National Security Advisor to Mr. Putin, Patrushev, said only the other day, we need the full denazification of Ukraine. If it takes 1, 2, 3 years, we will continue. So Russian war aims remain very large, and the West can't allow Russia to prevail.
I hesitate to even mention this, but there is fear that there might be the use of nuclear weapons or at least chemical weapons. Do you expect that to pan out?
I think the chance is not zero, but it's really minimal for a couple of reasons. The first is that there's no real military advantage to be gained on the battlefield by the use of a tactical nuclear weapon. The second is that there are a number of people in the decision chain in Russia who would have to approve a tactical weapons use, and there's a risk that someone might say no. And then the third and most obvious reason is that there would be a huge conventional response from the West. And of course, the West has nuclear weapons too, 3 different decision centers, Washington, Paris, and London. So it would be a really high risk for Putin to do that, and I doubt it would happen.
Yes, I didn't want to underscore it, but didn't want to ignore it either, because it is a part of the conversation
Absolutely.
across the world. If this does go your way, if Ukraine is able to repel this Russian attack, what do you expect will be the new order in Europe? We're already seeing Finland and Sweden wanting in on NATO. And Ukraine's been speaking about wanting to become a member of the EU. I think they've put to rest their desire to become a member of NATO, but definitely a member of the EU. How do you see things changing here in Europe?
I think the center of political gravity is moving towards the east and towards the north. The Franco-German engine is not the only propellant of European security or economic stability. The Finnish decision to enter NATO was really the most dramatic one, because for 70 years they felt that their position of military neutrality, of course politically they were already a member of the European Union, but military neutrality was serving them reasonably well. Now there's a fear of Russia, there's a total lack of trust in Russia, so their previous strategic stance was untenable. This is Putin's enlargement of NATO. There was no effort of NATO to include Sweden and Finland. As a result of Putin's actions, 20% of Finland's population only 3 months ago was in favor of joining NATO. 20% moved to 80%. In Sweden, it was a small minority. That moved to a majority. The only thing that happened in between was Russia's invasion of Ukraine. So it's Putin's enlargement of NATO.
Where does this leave Russia?
Russia will be left probably as a very diminished power. Many countries in the Middle East and in Asia understandably have wanted to hedge in the multipolar world and have decided to maintain decent relations with Russia. The problem for those, including India, is that Russia's strategic currency is in decline. And so it's not a good time to be long Russia and short the United States or Europe. And India, that has depended hugely on Russian military relationship and Russian arms, may find by the end of this calendar year that the spare parts, the maintenance for that Russian equipment is not there, which is why the United States and others have offered to backfill if one discovers that, in fact, Russian equipment is not so operable in the coming years. And certainly the ability of Russia to maintain exports into the Middle East and Asia and other markets will be very difficult starting already the beginning of next year.